Hey everybody, it's Lavendertowne. And lately I've been seeing some pretty severe criticism of Hazbin Hotel's character designs and art direction on Twitter. Like, this seems really harsh. So as someone who went to school for character design and who has two traditionally published comics of my own, I thought it might be useful to look at this whole situation, see if people are just being haters, if there's any legitimacy to it, and talking about the issues of visual clarity and character design. I did want to jump in and say I do have a theory about why some Hazbin Hotel haters are so extreme about it, and I think it's because of two factors. One, I think there's a level of jealousy about the meteoric success and rise of this story, even though it is so similar to what a lot of us sort of dream up when we're young teenagers about, like, misunderstood devils and heaven and hell. And like, even my own webcomic when I was like 14 is about a angel incorrectly being sent to hell and meeting the son of the devil. So like, this is such like a thing that so many artists go through, and I think it's hard for some people to look at a storyline that's so similar to that and see it like being treated like as an actual idea and not just like a silly phase that teenagers go through. As well as I do think it's causing people to cringe because it's reminding them of stories and OCs that they're not proud of anymore. I don't know this for sure, but it is something that when I was watching the show for research for this video, I definitely started to understand, I think, more why some people have such a negative reaction to it right off the bat. So this is just going to be me kind of looking at what people's concerns are about these character designs and seeing essentially if they're legitimate, and if they are, kind of what could be done to help with this. So I'm taking this screenshot because I think it is a good example of what people are talking about when they criticize the character designs. So first we have to establish if there actually is a problem with the designs in Hazbin Hotel. So what is the problem with Hazbin Hotel? I think the biggest thing that most people are really talking about, whether they realize it or not, is readability and visibility of the characters, clarity. So let's make this really small. Right away, we're seeing some of the problem here, right? When it's this little, everything kind of like melds together, and it's not just the characters. I think a lot of people are focusing on the fact that the characters all have a very similar color palette, like it's all red, it's all white, and it's all black. Okay, so let's color drop some of these colors, right? So here is the white of Charlie's skin. Same thing with this character's white hair, this character's face. And if we look at the reds, it's like this reddish pink color. It's quite a nice color. But as we're moving along, you see they're really similar. And because of that, like right here, his hand is melding into her top, right? This is a clarity issue. And that's going to keep happening, right? Because the characters have such similar color palettes, when they overlap each other like this, we're going to have this problem again and again and again, because they have so many areas where there's similarity. And even on the characters themselves, like Charlie, her face versus her hair, really not that far away from each other, which at a smaller size can make her look kind of like just a little ghost, a little blob. If it wasn't for her super strong like eyeliner around her eyes, her whole face would kind of disappear. One thing that could be done, if you wanted to make all your characters sort of reddish color like this, we're going to do this super fast. Okay, I did like the worst possible job of this, but so this is the characters essentially cut out, right? I'm cutting out them from this red sofa and the red room and everything else. We're going to do like a little overlay layer. And right off the bat, wow, look at the difference here. By making the primary color in the background purple, the characters are popping out way more. You can actually appreciate some of these more interesting silhouettes on the characters. They don't just disappear into the background. You can, see these things like this big crazy eyebrow that's popping out, or, her little bow on top of her head. Anything like that. There's another thing you can do if you don't want it to be like dark like that. Now I'm just lightening the background a little bit. So it's still technically like they're in a red space, but because I've separated them more, Again, they're popping out. There's a lot of situations where a little extra clarity could really help someone appreciate or enjoy your show more. And I think that all of these things would help. So here again is an example of some loss of definition, I would say, in the characters, because once they overlap, you really start to see those similarities quite a bit. It's definitely hard to tell what's going on at a distance, but even close up, because this is a relatively low res image and we're losing some of the line art, you can really see that like in areas like this and areas like this, like for me, at first, like I don't know what this is. Like I realized once I looked closer, so this is this character's body here. But at first I kind of thought that her body was like doing this, like this was the end of a dress. And I think stuff like that is just gonna keep happening. Unless, wait, is this her dress? Hold on. I thought she had like she has like a dark skirt, right? I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure what this is. What is this? I don't know. Regardless, beyond the color palette similarities, I also think we are having a bit of a problem with very similar shapes. The body shapes are remarkably similar. Whether they're male or female characters, they're gonna have a little tiny waist. It's just gonna cause them to kind of take up very similar like types and shapes of mass on the screen. The other thing I'd like to add is that there are a lot of tiny little details on a lot of these characters, and I'm not sure if they're strictly necessary or if it's that beneficial, considering that, you know, some animators are going to have to animate these guys, and some of these things, like particularly these little details up in this character's hat, as well as some of the like little rivets on the wings, these are things I almost feel like maybe should be simplified a little bit for animation. Okay, before I do any like actual redesigning, the first thing I want to do is just take this promotional image and see if I can change the colors around and fix a lot of the things that people complain about. So mainly I'm just going to be going over with a color layer, changing the colors of certain parts of the characters' designs and seeing when they start to really look distinct from each other, even on this rich red background. Now at first I thought people on Twitter were really nitpicking and selecting the scenes where the color and the background were the most like meldy, but I realized that like this is a promotional image that was intentionally released for Hazbin Hotel. So like this is the most fair shake I can give the show. This is something that they are intentionally like spreading the word about the animation with. So this is clearly something they want to stick with. So I'm just going to try to make sure that the characters are looking distinct and strongly standing out from that background. I'm playing with a lot of different things. I'm definitely changing the maid's hair color later because that's too bright. But I did really like and latch on to this idea of Alistair being in sepia tone. They already do a lot of really cool and inventive stuff with him, and I think him fully being in another color palette would be really awesome. I almost feel like one of his original designs he was in sepia. I don't know if I'm just fully making that up or what, because he wasn't like that in the pilot, but for some reason I have some memory of this. Anyway, I think they should either bring it back or try it in this alternate universe where this show is still in development and not actively coming out. Once I got the tone and the colors looking a little more differentiated, I wanted to try simplifying a couple of the characters' designs. Nothing too crazy yet, just to see if removing a few things could actually make the characters sing a little bit more. I think for a lot of people, myself included, that Husk is kind of the busiest character design. He's the most like furry looking, I would say, and he's just kind of covered in lots and lots of little stripes and rivets and all kinds of different symbols all over him. So I wanted to see what he would look like if we removed a couple of those, and I did realize that we were actually losing visual storytelling, which is the last thing I want to do, because he is, or used to be, like a famous gambler and a magician, so he had the like heart in his ear to reference his time with cards. So instead I just replaced his plain buttons on his chest with buttons in the shape of suits of cards and used that instead of the hearts over his eyebrows and inside his ear. I also removed the stripes from his eyebrows and his top hat, and I think it looks a little cleaner, but again, that's just totally my opinion. So now I'm going to start my little like alternate universe if I was in charge of designing these characters for animation. And just to be clear, I am glad that I am not. I'm glad that Hazbin Hotel was made by a creator who is not me, who has their own style and vision for it, and it's their passion project. So this is, again, not trying to be obnoxious or anything. It's more just like a fun redesign, you know, something I wanted to try out because my character design like decisions that I make are so different from Vivzy Pops, and I tend to go for like such simplicity. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm less willing to draw this amount of detail on characters that I'm gonna have to draw over and over again. But regardless, I thought it would be interesting to see like the Lavendertowne version of Hazbin Hotel's characters, and I'll kind of explain why I keep what I keep and why I change what I change as we move along. So starting, I of course had to draw Charlie and Vaggie. They are very connected characters from the beginning, so that's where I usually start when I'm designing characters. I want to start with the characters who are going to have the most interactions and make sure that they look really distinct from each other. That is something that I've always focused on, and I think it's interesting because I think that for me, I actually have the opposite problem to what a lot of people complain about in Vivzy Pop's work, which is that everything is like blending together. I think that my problem is that my characters have more of a tendency to clash, and I'm always trying to find ways to make them more harmonious. So I actually think it's really interesting for me to try to tackle these characters just because I think they come from a totally opposite end of the spectrum as far as like color palette and those types of decisions. So they already have a pretty big height difference, Charlie and Vaggie. So I pretty much just maintained that. I made Charlie pretty like skinny and tall looking, and then I made Vaggie a little bit chunkier, I would say. I just wanted her to have more mass, kind of more of a pear shape. And I just did that so that they would look more visually different and have more of a separate silhouette. And it does seem like Charlie in the show is supposed to be more of an ectomorph, whereas we can see a little bit more of like hips on Vaggie's character. Then I'm going to draw in Angel, who is a character design that's probably, if I had to pick one, is probably one that like I'm not as big of a fan of. I'm not really sure why it doesn't like work for me, and again, like I know he's a very popular character, so this could totally just be me, but I find like his head is a little like Hey Arnold proportions, and I think that it just unsettles me. And I also don't, it seems like he's all made out of fur, but I don't really know. I know he's supposed to be inspired by a spider, and that's why he has like the multiple arms, but for me I just tried to focus more on his fuzziness and simplify his design as far as his outfit. Color palette wise, I wanted to make sure I was still getting in those pops of bright red that are so like beloved in Hazbin Hotel, but in order for the hotel to stay a reddish color in the background, I decided to make sure that those reds were just accent colors so that they weren't making the characters disappear on a red background. I decided to add horns to two characters. I know that Charlie actually can like have horns, they sort of like animate in every once in a while, but I thought that if she's supposed to be a demon princess, it would be really cool if she had horns in sort of the shape and dimensions of like a tiara. My biggest complaint for myself about Hazbin's character designs is actually not that they're too busy, because frankly I have kind of a guilty pleasure for over-the-top character designs. Like I am one of those sickos who actually likes the Danganronpa designs, even though like objectively I know that they're so insane and they go so over the top with it, but I think that they are very memorable for that reason. So I don't necessarily hate like the clutter, but for me it's because I don't feel like the clutter of these characters always actually like ties back into who they are. Like for example, I feel like there's tons and tons of symbols and fluff and like ears on a lot of characters, and I feel like they're just vestigial from these characters' initial designs, but they are no longer relevant to them. Like Alistair's character, who I know he's one of the most popular and they do so many fun things with him, but I do think like his ears, I don't really know what the point of those are. Maybe I'm missing something, but I truly don't know. And I feel like even with Angel Dust, like his outfits, other than the thigh highs, I don't know how much they're really telling us about him. You know, he's got like these pink freckles, he's got this one yellow tooth, which I do have to give credit to Vivzy Pop for this. The usage of different types and colors of teeth on the characters is kind of unusual, and it looks amazing. It's actually a great way to differentiate your characters that I always forget about, so that's really cool. I also saw a lot of complaints about like the same face syndrome, like everyone doing this sort of evil sharky smile, and to me this just sounds like a redo of the like Cal Arts like bean smile controversy of 2010 or whatever. It's just, I don't think that's a legitimate complaint, really. I get the idea that like if you reserve certain facial expressions in animation to just one character, like for example Nimona, sometimes that can really make them have a life of their own, and I think that's totally a legitimate strategy. But I don't think you can say that the characters who are constantly changing expressions falling into similar facial expressions necessarily means that it's like bad or wrong. That's just my take on it. Yeah, the character I changed the most in my sort of like imagined redesign is probably Alistair, just because when I look up references of like the oldest radio stars and radio show hosts that he's clearly supposed to harken back to with this like retro energy that he's bringing, they have like slicked back hair, and they're all like wearing ties and stuff, and I think that like leaning more into that would work better with his character concept, as well as I put in a little antler motif because apparently he's supposed to be, or he was originally like a deer, and I don't really see any of that in his normal character design, especially because he does have sharp teeth, which deer typically don't. Apparently he's like a deer cannibal. I don't know the full details. I stuck with the sepia for him. I'm just like in love with that concept now, and it would definitely help him stand out from the other characters. And I kept his very yellowed teeth because I think that's great, and it also makes me think of radio show hosts like smoking 1 million packs of cigarettes a day. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts and seeing my redesigns, and I hope that this came across respectful. It's definitely not my intention to try to fix someone else's work. I just thought that since it was getting so much vitriol on various parts of the internet, it would be interesting to take a more measured look at what was going on and what people were complaining about underneath the kind of insulting feedback. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I will see you guys in the next one. Huge thank you to my wonderful patrons, including Twink on a Sink, Raccoon Jam, The Aidenverse, Scott Wilson, Grexius, Olia, Liddy Savior, Brandon Stark, CB, Cosby F, Lucy Amajiki, Liv, Salty Jackrabbit, Raven's Crow, Zosalot, Teal Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Kadarius, Deadly Nightshade Art, Astral Fox Art, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsuvaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.